the government of Trinidad and Tobago had decided that dog control legislation had become a necessity to protect citizens from maulings and even death by dangerous dogs.
12 years after it was debated and passed in Parliament with a 3/5 majority, the Dangerous Dogs Act will take effect from August 1st, 2012. Here are the details in this Davia Chambers report.
This follows a cabinet decision last Thursday to enforce the law by proclamation of the President. The act prohibits importation and breeding of 3 categories of dogs: the Pit Bull Terrier, Fila Brasileiro, and Japanese Tosa. The Minister of Local Government will have the power to declare any other type of dog dangerous if they present a serious danger to the public.
But the more I heard of the legislation, the more worried I became. It seemed as though the legislation would only be focusing on one breed: the American Pit Bull Terrier. Being the owner of a Pit Bull mixed breed myself, I became very interested and wondered what the passing of the law would mean for my pet and I. I began researching and came to find out this legislation is very controversial, with the country mainly split into 2 camps, the government on one side and the zoological professionals and animal activists on the other. I began to ask the questions that desperately needed answers. Would this proposed law work? Will it keep citizens from being bitten? And if not, why? And what would happen to the pit bull breed in this country if this law is actually passed? This is an investigation into Trinidad and Tobago's Dangerous Dogs Act of 2013. The first question I needed answered was, why is this legislation focusing on just the pit bull? Is this the only dangerous breed on the island?
You have to understand about the pit bull, the history of the pit bull. The pit bull has been around for a long time, but it was in a different way. People say, well, you know, pit bulls were bred to fight. Almost every dog was bred to fight at some time or the other. And pit bulls, some pit bulls were bred to fight, but that was not every pit bull was bred to fight, okay? Pit bulls were in the First World War. They were decorated in the First World War. Second World War, same thing. They had medals. At one time in the United States of America, they were called the nanny dog because people felt they were so good with children. And people felt confident to leave their children with this dog to look after it, and so on and so forth. So the pit bull has been around for a long time. But it has not been a super, Hen Keller had a pit bull. It was on TV, you know, but it wasn't a super popular dog, okay? In the 1980s, dog fighting came back into fashion. Dog fighting has always been around, from ever since. But it had kind of died down, and only certain types of people would do it, and only certain pockets of a civilization would have dog fighters. But all of a sudden, it became big business. We talk about plenty money, right? And one of the strongest, in the sense of loyalty, dogs is the pit bull. It will do anything for its master. Dog fighters, that is a dog fighter's dream. You have a dog that is strong, that is willing to die for you. And so they decided to use pit bulls as their dog of choice. That was the breed of the month kind of thing, right? And they got very popular among that type of person. They were still owned by other people, but it became the dog. And a lot of hype started around them. You started to see decals with this vicious dog with this stud. A whole sort of PR job started to be done on the pit bull. Not only dog fighters, as it caught on, dog fighting is an illegal activity. So it became a kind of an underworld dog. And take, for instance, other people involved in criminal activity like drug pushers. No drug pusher worth his salt is going to have any other dog but a pit bull. You know what I mean? It was a status symbol. A lot of young men who were bad boy wannabes. A pit bull, that's the dog to have. You know, you show your masculinity and all your virility by owning a pit bull. And it began to get this hype, this public relations, this image.
Now that we understand the reason for the pit bull's notoriety, what effect does it have on the public at large?
Because dogs bite people every day, the ones that actually make the media would be the ones that people would die from, or it's mauling that has actually occurred. So the intensity of the attack is actually a little bit more, or a lot more severe than a normal small breed dog actually just snapping at its owner and causing a scratch. And unfortunately, when any large breed dog has actually been involved in a human attack, the media just print or report that it's a pit bull without actually having ascertained the facts.
There was a group, a canine advocate group, that did a little study recently, and they showed how when mixed breed dogs attack or bite, even to being, to the person being bitten fatally, and that, in other words, dying, the local papers would cover it. When a pit bull attacks, it's worldwide. It is worldwide.
In 2008, an American advocacy group called the National Canine Research Council conducted a study on the extreme differences in the media when reporting on attacks by pit bulls versus other breeds. In December of that year, an Arizona woman was killed by 1 or 2 dogs reported to the authorities to be Labrador Retrievers. One local newspaper published an article following the discovery of her body. Also in December, a California man was killed by 1 or 2 dogs that the media reported as his grandson's pit bull dogs. This incident was reported by 285 media outlets, both nationally and internationally. MSNBC, Forbes, USA Today, Fox News, CBS News, and ABC News all picked up the story.
These dogs were actually bred to bring down other animals, so they do have an inherent predatory drive in them still, which most dogs actually still do have, but nonetheless these dogs, because of their powerful size, they can actually cause a lot more damage. We have crime spiraling in most countries in the world, and people want to feel safe, and one of the ways to actually feel safe is you have a dog in your home that helps to guard and protect your home and your family. The pit bulls have become a fashion statement, and just as fads change throughout the years, they are now the current trend, and many people actually want to own a pit bull, but if they don't know how to properly care for that dog or how to keep the rest of society safe with regards to any type of large breed dog, then we have the incidence of dog bites increasing in proportion to the number of dogs that are actually owned, or the number of that specific breed of dogs that's actually owned.
We have no idea, We don't know if we have 1 pit bull or a million pit bulls. We don't know what types of dogs we have. Or really and truly speaking, we don't know what dogs are really doing biting. The only thing we have to go on is newspaper reports. And newspapers report when certain dogs bite. Or more importantly, certain dogs kill. That's what is the sensationalism. But you don't really know which dogs are biting, which dogs are attacking. People say to you, well, how come when we had Dobermans there weren't so many attacks? Well, when we had Dobermans as the most popular dog, or Rottweilers as the most popular dog, we did not have internet. That was pre-internet. When internet became very popular, so did the pit bull. Coincidentally, one thing had nothing to do with the other, obviously, but it was to the detriment of the pit bull. Because when somebody in the United States of America, New York, gets bitten by a Rottweiler, we never hear about it in Trinidad. Let a pit bull in Quito, I don't know, someplace behind God back, bite somebody now. The whole world will hear about it, 50 seconds flat. Particularly if it's a child. It was projected more and faster and more enthusiastically than any other dog. Other dogs were, like take for instance the Doberman. The Doberman, Hollywood had the Doberman all over every devil show they ever had. The Doberman was the dog from Satan's, yeah, right? The Rottweiler, you never saw a picture of a Rottweiler unless you saw his teeth, they were always like that, but not like the pit bull. It was a coincidence with the almost every step of the way, but it was like just at the wrong time, or maybe the right time, depending on whose side you're on. Because, it did frighten the world. They did the job that they set out to do.
So the difference was that
they weren't as widely owned as pit bulls. You know, yes, people had Dobermans, and people had German Shepherds, and they had Rottweilers. But pit bulls, I mean, when pit bulls started to become popular here, they just took off. And you know, if you looked in the section of the papers, that, you know, for sales of animals, sales of dogs and so on, 80% used to be pit bulls. 80% of the ads used to be pit bulls. Everybody had pit bulls. You go into any little community, you go into country, or, you know, people would have pit bulls. I have never seen a situation where one breed like that was so popular in the country.
With the pit bull breed's newfound notoriety in the late 80s and early 90s, we saw a move away from Rottweilers and Dobermans as the popular breeds in the country. Everyone wanted to own a pit bull because of the image it now represented. Some wanted it for intimidation, but many more wanted it for protection. The pit bull population vastly expanded. So did the amount of irresponsible owners, which in turn led to the increase in the attacks on humans by the breed. The media exacerbated the situation by running falsified stories, and at times, total untruths. Fear sells, and nobody wants to read the story of a pot-hound attack. At this point, the government stepped in and decided to draft a breed-specific piece of legislation, or BSL, in the hopes of curbing the instances of dog attacks in the country. Could it work?
A breed-specific legislation or law, which means that it is geared towards the control of specific breeds of dogs, and it presumes in law that these dogs are a danger to human society. I got very concerned, and I had to form a group called Trinidad and Tobago Canine Advocates, and we protested.
Why were you concerned about the bill coming back?
Primarily because the purpose of any breed-specific legislation that is developed like this is to prevent dog bites. And breed-specific legislations do not prevent dog bites. So, as a taxpayer, for one, I was concerned that they were wasting my money. I pumped it into a legislation that was going to work.
Right.
As a concerned citizen, I was concerned that based on the experience of other countries, not only do they not prevent dog bites, but in some instances they increase the dog bites. And thirdly, I was concerned for the dogs. What would happen to the dogs? Also based on the experience of other countries, because this is nothing new. The BSLs became very popular around the late 1990s, like around here. Miami-Dade County was one of the first places to put one in. And if you look at the history of that type of legislation, I was very concerned about the welfare of the animals.
Why does breed-specific legislation, why does it work?
If you mean to cut down on dog bites, it doesn't work.
Right.
If you mean to get rid of a breed, yeah, it works.
To cut down on dog bites, why would it not be effective?
Because it doesn't address the cause. You cannot stop something if you don't address what is causing it. It's like trying to stop a disease and you don't know what is causing the disease. So it doesn't address the cause and the root cause of dog bites, which includes, among other things, lack of socialization of the dog. If a dog is not accustomed to being with strangers or accepting strangers, or conversely, if a dog has only been shown and demonstrated to a dog that a stranger is a bad thing, that he should attack, which is what is done when you give a dog aggression training, which happens with a lot of pit bulls in Trinidad, all over the world in fact, then you're going to have a situation that any time a dog can get to a stranger, he or she, the dog, is going to bite the stranger. This BSLs on the whole, generally, the ones that don't eliminate the dogs right out, the ones that try to restrict the movement of the dogs, restrict them to the point that they can't. The owner cannot take the dog out in public free. If the owner has to take the dog out in public, The dog has to be muzzled, and so on and so forth. That alone prevents socialization. Education is non-existent in our BSL. Not all BSLs, but in our BSL. It doesn't exist, public education on how to interact with dogs. Abuse is a big reason that causes dog bites. Abuse, animal abuse. That is a big cause of dogs attacking. There is nothing in that law that speaks. In clause 5A says that you should not abuse animals. That's it. One of the clauses says that if the dog's tag, ID tag, falls off, you can be fined $50,000 and go to jail for a year. This clause 5A says you're not supposed to abuse dogs, and there's no penalty. There's no penalty. There is a statutory offense that says that if you abuse an animal, you're liable to a fine of $300. That's an old 19. I think that was written in 1918 or 1921 or something
so
like that.
obviously there's a kind of bias. Okay.
There is a bias in any breed-specific legislation. If you stop using the word breed and start using the word race and apply it to humans, people would be aghast. It is like having a race-specific legislation. It is like saying some Italian men are murderers, so we are going to restrict or ban or eliminate all Italian men. It amounts to that. Because some of these breeds have bitten people, they're going to eliminate all of them. And basically that is a serious bias. I mean, and more importantly, at least to me, it does not work.
There is a lot of confusion as to what constitutes a pit bull terrier type dog.
And why is that?
That is because the pit bull terrier is not a breed of dog. It's not a pure breed of dog. It's actually a mixed breed dog, and it falls under the pit bull category, the pit bull family of dogs. This is actually the Molosser family. That name derives from ancient Greece, which is the area where that dog was actually developed or first originated. There are 103 specific breeds within that particular category. So what are we looking at when we actually use the word pit bull terrier? What the government have done is they've actually picked out 6 breeds from that particular category. That was those 103 breeds of dogs. Those are the American Pit Bull Terrier, the American Staffordshire Terrier, and the American Bully, and that's based on popularity of ownership of that breed throughout the world, not in Trinidad, and that's because in Trinidad we have no statistics with regards to what breeds of dogs we have in this country. And the other 3 are the fighting dogs. There's the Japanese Tosa, the Fila Brasilero, and the Dogo Argentino. And those breeds ended up on this legislation because those breeds were actually on the Dangerous Dogs Act of 1991 for the United Kingdom, and our act is based on that specific piece of legislation.
Breed-specific legislation makes absolutely no sense. Because they have so many other breeds besides pit bulls that just probably don't appeal to the wrong type of owners, that would do just as much damage. And now you ban this breed, they're going to get the next breed and they do the same thing, you know?
I would have preferred a non-breed specific legislation that covers every dog. So like, I mean, according to what was proposed in the United States, is that anybody, like if you have any kind of dog, if your dog known to rush people at the gates or somewhere outside want to run people down the road, if it wasn't breed specific, you could say, well, look, you know what, let's tell the owner there's a committee or something in the neighborhood, tell the owner, you know, you have a dog that seems to be bad and you have to take after it, and if that doesn't work, you go to the next higher stage whereby you get the legal authorities to come in, and you could go to a higher stage in case you had to charge them, because all dogs are potential capable of biting. In fact, to me, one of the worst dogs I know is the Rottweiler. I don't think I could take a chance with a pit bull, but I wouldn't take a chance with a Rottweiler. Most Rottweilers come in, I'll muscle them to start with. And German Shepherds, you got to watch them. They're very vicious.
There's a trend about it with pit bulls, and I suppose it was felt will be fitting in with this trend. And these problems are occurring here, so we will do what other people do, and we will put in place stringent legislation. Our argument to the government was that, you know, when legislation is put in other countries, there's a background of you know, there's also a framework of dog control legislation generally, and resources and things put in place. Here in Trinidad, we have almost nothing.
I have no evidence, nothing has been brought in front of me to show me that a breed-specific legislation in any part of this world has ever worked. We have about 24 countries that have breed-specific legislation. Venezuela is supposed to be putting in theirs by the end of this year. So, countries are still adding. Almost every single veterinary association or organization has said they don't. All the Society for Prevention and Cruelty to Animals across the world has said they don't work. The Atlanta Center for Disease Control, which is the #1 premier public health authority in the world, has said that there's no evidence that they work. What more you want?
In December of 2013, the American Veterinary Medical Association published a study on the co-occurrence of potentially preventable factors in 256 dog bite-related fatalities in the United States from the years 2000 to 2009. The results showed major co-occurrent factors in the 256 dog bite-related fatalities, including absence of able-bodied persons to intervene, 81%, incidental or no familiar relationship with victims of dogs, 86%, owner failure to neuter dogs, 84%, compromised ability of victims to interact appropriately with dogs, 77%, dogs kept isolated from regular positive human interactions versus family dogs, 76%, and many more. For 401 dogs described in various media accounts, reported breed differed for 124, 30%. For 346 dogs with both media and animal control breed reports, breed differed for 139, 40%. Valid breed determinations were only possible for 18%. In the case of dog bite-related fatalities, 20 breeds, including 2 known mixes, were identified. The study concluded most dog bite-related fatalities were characterized by coincident preventable factors. Breed was not one of these. Study results supported previous recommendations for multifactorial approaches instead of single-factor solutions, such as breed-specific legislation for dog bite prevention. All the research points to the fact that breed-specific legislation does not help curb the instances of dog attacks. But how does the general public feel about this legislation?
Of course, we have not done a broad survey of the public reaction. And we, of course, deal more with people who have concerns about the act or are unhappy about it. But I would say that there are a range of reactions. For some people, they're going to be relieved by the legislation because maybe they're living in a community where they have owners of the dogs who are not responsible, and they've had problems with pit bulls roaming in their neighborhood, or they feel unsafe about a neighbor who has pits that don't seem to be properly contained in the yard, or you have incidents where pit bulls attack other people's dogs and kill them and that kind of thing. So for some people are going to be relieved and they say, right, finally we're getting the situation under control. Other people, some owners who really depend heavily on their dogs for security, are going to be very unhappy. Because I've had people talk to me and say, look, we were robbed 3 times until we got our pit bull, and now we feel safe. And so, I mean, a lot of owners who have pits and who are good owners are unhappy because they feel the dogs are being victimized, and that a lot of the laws are unfair to the animals. But I would say a significant percentage of the population is still doesn't understand the legislation. There's been a lot of uncertainty about what the legislation means and the implications of it. So there's probably a fair percentage of the population who still don't understand what the legislation is all about.
The general consensus is that people will just move on to another breed. Do you believe that's the case?
I don't think it's a general consensus, maybe among dog owners and pit bull owners. But if you listen for hour 1 or 2, I mean, I make a mistake and switch that station now and then, and people really believe that the legislation is going to make a difference. And I can't tell them that they're wrong. I can't tell them that they're right either.
Well, that aspect is a good because remember, lives that lost and limbs that lost for the dangerous pit bulls, right? I mean, it kinda hard, especially for families of people who've been attacked by and mauled by pit bulls and so on. So controlling, at least that's a good start, right? Rather than people ignoring that fact, you know, because it's animals and it's dangerous animals, not just normal pet. You know, like it's not, they're talking about a potong, they're talking about pit bulls and these animals that endangered people. I mean, endangered people lives and what have you. So I feel it's something that is a positive start in the controlling of that.
Well, it's a good idea to restrict ownership of certain types of dogs. Yeah. Like any other law in this country, we only work in the enforcement. And we have laws for almost everything, but we lack enforcement. So I think what they're really trying to avoid where that particular piece of legislation is concerned is the ownership of the dogs by people who are not responsible. And well, obviously the dogs attacking people and claiming lives of a number of persons and so on.
Well, to be honest with you, I don't know much about the law, but if I had to say something about it, is that I believe that there are plenty dangerous dogs that people should have proper maintenance of. So to a certain extent, it being in act is very good. Other than that, I'm not too sure. Dog bites, well, yeah, people will be held accountable for if their dog does get outside of the perimeter that they're supposed to be in. So yeah, most likely it would work in keeping people mindful about it. And well, they will be held accountable. Once you're held accountable to something, you're going to try your best to stay within the law in that aspect.
Well, I don't have much information about the dangerous dogs apart from, I know it was planned because other dogs were attacking people and that kind of thing. So I know it was put into effect, but as I know about the plan in particular, I don't know. Well, I can only assume that it would work in that effect, but I really don't know what the actual plan is to put into place.
Well, it's good actually, because there's some folks who work with the dogs and muzzle, and that isn't really kosher at all. I agree with it. I don't know in depth what it means, like the total meaning of the law. I've read it as yet, but it's good.
You feel that it will stop people from being bitten, mauled, or even killed by these dogs?
It should, if the law is put into practice.
I think that it could make a difference. I think that once the law is actually established, it could really make it could stand out, I really think that people could really be more at ease, and I don't know, things will be a lot more clearer to people like that.
Alright, so you think that it will help prevent dog bites, mauling by dogs, and even death by dangerous dogs?
I think so.
You really feel it would?
I think so, I really do.
While making this documentary, I came to realize that most Trinidadians have no idea what this legislation is about. The country's zoological professionals and animal activists have made it abundantly clear to the government that this proposed legislation will not work. So why is it still on the fast track to becoming law?
Well, I think, look, it was people were being killed, right? And I mean, people being mauled to death by dogs is pretty high profile. So I think the government felt they had to do something about it. And I mean, I can't say the consultation was very extensive. I mean, we did attend one meeting, we submitted a position paper and so on. But I think the problem is people trivialize the whole thing. They think it's just dogs, and they don't think that there's anything to really research or find out about. They think these dogs are a problem, well, let's put in place legislation that will ensure that the dogs have no contact with the public.
Why do you think they are still going along with it, even though they can't enforce this law?
I think that's a political question, and I will attempt not to answer politically. However, I think it is to show the people that they are doing something and that there's something in place. What I feel may happen with this legislation is it will be on the books, but it will not be enforced. However, if somebody does get bitten or mauled or, God forbid, killed by one of these dogs, then there is some type of remuneration in place to be had. It does not, however, address if a Rottweiler or a German Shepherd or a Husky or an Akita or any other breed of dog in this country actually bites or kills or injures or mauls someone.
Is this legislation just a political move? Do they really care if it works or not? And what is going to happen to the pit bull breed?
In the short term, what will happen is pretty much what has been happening for the past 2 years. So, ever since 2011, when the government first started, since 2012, when the government first started rehashing this particular piece of legislation, which actually stems from the Dangerous Dogs Act of 2000, is that people have started panicking. So the government have, in my opinion, put the cart before the horse, where instead of actually putting infrastructure in place and hiring people and training people and being able to actually deal with the potential situation of abandonment of dogs, what they've done is they've actually rushed the legislation forth, and they have no way of actually dealing with the fallout. And that fallout is that the mentality in Trinidad is, I'm afraid of something, or I'm afraid that I'm no longer going to be able to own my dog, and I'm afraid that owning my dog means I'm going to get locked up, or I'm going to get charged really high fines, so therefore I'm going to get rid of the dog. And some people would do this by beating the dog, by poisoning the dog, and others will take it a step further and actually take the dog to some remote location and abandon the dog there. Now, even though this legislation states that it is now illegal to abandon your dog, there is no way of actually tracing who owns that dog, and therefore there's no way of actually charging somebody for abandoning that dog. The TSBC, the Animals Alive Animal Welfare Network, myself, some private vets that actually help out, we have actually dealt with almost 300 cases of abandoned pit bull terrier type dogs in the past year alone, and that's just scratching the surface. Those are the ones that are reported to us, far less for the ones who get dumped in the bush somewhere and people don't actually see them, or people don't actually make the calls. So we have a lot of animal cruelty that's being condoned by the government at this point in time.
We do not have the personnel to take charge of the bill, right? The Ministry of Local Government is in charge of the whole scenario. Workers from that ministry are not trained to rescue a dog because of the stigma behind the pit bull. If it's loose on the street, they would not go out of their way to rescue that dog or hold a dog because they are afraid to be bitten.
They are totally unprepared for this to deal with this legislation. Completely unprepared. They don't have equipment, they don't have trained staff, they don't have pound facilities. I mean, they bring here because there's no pound. There's 1 pound in the whole country, government pound, which is the San Fernando pound, which is a disaster. Very small, badly managed, and so on. So about 4 corporations come in here. They closed down the Port of Spain pound.
A philosopher by the name of Kant once said that you can tell what kind of society, I'm paraphrasing obviously, you can tell what kind of society you have by the way your people treat their animals. And if that is a judge, we in plenty trouble, because we do not take care of our animals. All you need to do is go down to the TSPCA for 1 day, and you would see people bringing in animals, relinquishing animals that they have owned. These are not animals that they picked up on the street. These are their own animals. And you say to them, how in God's name did that happen? They're especially now with the Dog Control Act being passed, people are not willing or able to adhere to the regulations. There was a case, and the neighbor called the TSPCA, and we sent someone. They had a pit bull, and they tied it to a tree and left it to starve. There are pit bulls especially being brought into the TSPCA in horrific, I'm talking about, there was one last week, from here to there was nothing but bone. Maggots had eaten it right away. The dog could not walk, he was just waiting to die. He was just lying waiting to die. I can show you pictures of dogs with maggots on their head, on their neck, just you can see their organs inside. Dogs that are just skeletons. There was a case where went next door to the health center in, was it Maritaria and Sawa? I'm not too sure. There were cages of pit bulls. They were owned by a security company. And when the law was passed, when the law was approved last year by Senate and Parliament, the House of Representatives, these dogs were just locked in cages and left to die. Right next to the health center. No fence or anything, you know, people passing on the road saw these dogs. Skeletons, they all had to be euthanized.
Like in rescue on a daily basis, how often is it that they have pit bulls?
Now, okay, you have two types of pit bulls we're talking about, okay? You have the ones that are relinquished by their owners for euthanization because of whatever reason. And you have the ones that people pick up on the street, those are rescued. TSPCA does not have the facilities to rescue, to go out and rescue. Other organizations do that. As far as the relinquishments are concerned, last year alone, TSPCA 150 pit bulls were relinquished. Owned animals were relinquished to TSPCA. It is difficult for me to tell you how many have been rescued because ordinary people like you and I, all three of my pit bulls are rescued.
We looked at our pit bull figures going back to 2010, and you would practically none were given up voluntarily by owners, or there were very few rescues of pit bulls on the road. 2012 is when we really started to see pit bulls roaming on the streets, and you know, the numbers really went right up in 2013. So, I mean, 150 rescue cases is probably a reflection of maybe 10 times, 20 times, 50 times as much abandonment cases. We really can't actually see.
There were two pit bulls, that were left in front of Fatima College a few weeks ago. Just vagabonds.
What happens to these abandoned animals?
If they are very, very lucky, we get homes for them. That's a small percentage. What usually happens is that they are in such bad condition that it would take thousands of dollars, or at least hundreds, in the high hundreds of dollars, to in vet care and long-term health care to bring them back to health to begin with, right? And then you don't know if you're going to get a home for them. Sometimes they are so badly injured, like the one with the rotten foot, like the one with the hole in his head. There was a pit bull that from here go back was nothing. It was just totally gone. Those are instantly euthanized. I don't want to call percentages, but I will say that the majority of them are euthanized. If they are euthanized by TSPCA, they're what they call humanely euthanized, in that they are given a sedative and they're put to sleep, and then they're given the lethal injection. So they don't feel any pain, but they're dead.
We have figures for TTSPCA. In 2013, we took in up about 170 pit bulls. Many of these were given up by the owners. And when they were given up by the owners, the understanding was that they would be euthanized.
People are abandoning their dogs left and right, with extreme consequences, and the law has not even passed yet. When it does, it'll only get worse for the breed. So what can be done to fix this legislation, so that it actually helps to prevent dog bites?
What it does is it actually puts animal welfare at the forefront. There are standards, whether they're local standards or international standards, but standards of care for that particular animal. And with that standard of care actually comes an owner responsibility. You're not allowed to actually keep a dog if you don't have a fence, for instance. Many of us have been bitten by dogs who there's no fence and the dog actually rushes out on the street and bites somebody, or the dog is kept tied up on a leash, which creates a lot of frustration, and when a child is passing by, that child may be teasing the dog, taunting that dog. If that chain is not strong enough, that's actually going to burst, and the dog will actually rush after the child and bite the child. So in countries where they look at animal welfare first and then they build on responsible ownership, that will actually have a greater effect in terms of reducing the amount of dog bites?
We are very disappointed that in looking at this legislation there wasn't a greater effort to understand dog control in general, and we feel there's been a lost opportunity here to do a lot more towards putting proper dog control legislation in place, and also for including into the legislation duty of care for animals, which is something that we feel is sadly lacking in the country.
The proposed legislation is not going to stop people from being bitten. What it is going to do is further demonize and prosecute the pit bull breed to the point of extinction in this country, in some of the most inhumane ways possible. If the government really wants to stop the instances of dog bites, they need to urgently revisit this bill and heed the advice of the zoological professionals and animal activists before any more lives are unnecessarily lost, both human and animal.
I just hope that with the passing of the bill, people don't get their expectations too high and think that this is a solution to all the problems that we would have. It might be the first step, but it's definitely not the last.